Afternoon.
Afternoon for once. I had to
Yeah.
make it not so bright, but hopefully the camera will be fine.
Yeah, I couldn't sacrifice my aesthetics.
Well, you've got a beautiful tree. I've just got bright.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, I've got a farm outside, not
Yeah.
another house.
And if I opened it, then it would just be bright on the table, and that would be
Mm,
even more glary
Yeah, fair enough. At least your curtains look better than mine.
from a distance. I prefer those ones.
Okay, fair enough. I don't know. I feel like I want to replace them.
Let's drive 6 hours and swap.
Pass. Pass.
6 hours each way.
Yeah. Seven, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're further away now.
Yeah, I moved further away.
Oh, well.
So, what's on your mind today?
Oh, a bunch of things. The main one that I'm not sure if this happened before or after our last conversation, but sometimes you don't realize you're in a is this the right word, do you think? In a funk? Like in a bad place mentally until you're out of it? Like that sort of struggle to it's a little bit of a struggle to do anything and like it, there's no motivation to get on
Mm,
with interesting things. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's like mild depression, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Apologies.
And in retrospect, it's probably breaking up with the girlfriend I had for a month that triggered it, which sounds logical.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And but I that happened and I thought, so, oh, I don't feel bad. And then I had like a month or two of, oh, I should do some projects. Oh, I can't be bothered. Oh, no motivation and so on. And I had heard that it takes about as long to get over someone as you have time with them. It's like, oh, yeah, that fits.
I guess that would make sense as a
Yeah,
rule of thumb. Um, I wouldn't have a clue on that one.
yeah, yeah. But it's interesting to note for me personally that it's been about as long since I left my abusive ex-wife. The time since I left her is about equal to the time that I was with her.
That's interesting
Hmm.
because that sort of tracks too as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And I'd be surprised if she's seen our son, although that word leaves a bad taste in my mouth, more than a dozen times since that time, which go away, just stay away.
Yeah. You say your is fine. I think.
Yeah, but yeah, it made me think about that we've talked about finding the glimmers of meaning to follow in life,
Mm.
which is all very well till you can't seem to find any.
Yeah, that's the problem with depression. It clouds everything.
Mm,
Even those things that once gave you joy become. It's not just distasteful. It's not that everything becomes unpleasant. It's just it removes all of the good from
mm,
things. Everything becomes numb.
mm.
Would be the way I describe
Yeah,
it. um, yeah, I don't know. I'm not quite sure what useful insights I could for depression. It's a
mm.
hell of a topic.
The the description I've heard of it, which I can kind of see it, is that all the colours are less dull. And I know my
When you come
brother,
out.
yeah, or that you come out and then
Mm.
suddenly everything's bright, but not in, well, sometimes in a literal sense, but a
Mm.
lot of times I know my brother struggled with it to some degree, and he'd enjoy being on a boat sailing, but that was never of more value than or of more joy than the distaste of spending the time traveling in the car to get to the yacht club and set up the boat and then de-rigging it afterwards and heading back. Like that was always worse than the joy of being out on the boat in the fresh air.
Yeah, it's hard to. It is very hard to see how much it affects you while you're in it.
Hmm.
Like even trying to talk about the times in my life that, or the time, I suppose, that I was like that. It's hard to pin down any moment to think about how things felt because it all feels sort of normal while you're in it.
Mm.
And it makes normal feel, yeah. From my experience, from my, yeah, from my subjective first person experience at the time, I felt normal, but my perception of the world was negative.
Mm.
I was like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. I feel fine. It's just that the world is bad for whatever reason, this or that or the other thing. But it's hard to talk about any kind of experience I had at the time. But to your point, I vividly remember coming out of it.
Mm.
I remember exactly where I was. Like I was, um, this was late teens. I was in the passenger seat of my mother's car. I might have been 18, 19 maybe. And we were driving, um, we were on Brown Street coming across, um, oh God, I can't remember. It's been so long since I've been in Christchurch, I can't remember the street name. But I know the spot where it was, which
Mm.
corner. I can see the house on this side, I can see the petrol station on that side, around the corner after on Barrington Street after crossing Brom, right before the road that goes out to Rolleston, by the highway as it goes out.
Mm.
I remember the bus that goes up that line. I remember the color of the car that I was in, and I remember the view that I had in the moment when I came out of it because I was looking in a mirror, and it was like the first time in 5 years that I looked in the mirror, and I was happy with the sight of myself. And like you say, immediately it was like I can see color again. The air
Mm.
smelled sweet. The noise of the environment wasn't annoying, it was pleasant. And everything became sort of beautiful again, almost immediately. And I remember turning to my mother at the time and going, like, wow, this is great. And explaining what had just happened. But, 100 meters earlier down the road, in retrospect, would have been dull and grey and muted.
Mm.
There's all kind of advice that you could give to a person in that state of how to build your way out, but you get that issue you were talking about with your brother, which is even if you know exactly what you need to do to build yourself out of it, there's a built-in resistance.
Yeah. Like
Actions
I
feel more costly.
yeah, even like if I go back, I think it was like a week and a half ago that I came out of it.
Mm,
Because last weekend I was diving into projects. This weekend I've been diving into projects, getting my bathroom set up as a dark room, working on an antenna that's currently scattered all over my floor so that I can, like, the sort of things that had been in the back of my mind for
mm.
a month or so, but I
Being
hadn't
you
really,
again.
yeah, yeah. And I had been not getting to sleep at a good time, like staying up too late, trying to find a way to feel good, I think. Like,
Mm,
not wanting to just
chasing
go to
pleasures.
sleep because trying to get something. And I I believed that if I could fix that, then I would uh come out of it. And I had made a little bit of progress, like from 11:30 to 10, which is still a bit on the late side for me. But I don't think that was it because it's still later than I think is ideal for me at the moment. That wasn't the thing that triggered out of it, but that's even though I believe that could be an exit, and quite possibly it might have been
Mm,
contributing to it or
yeah.
accelerated it if I did. But even though I believed that that could fix it, it was still something I hadn't managed to do. It's like it drains your ability to do anything, and that I remember a clip that Jordan Peterson had talking about how I think he'd had patients who had such bad depression that sitting up in bed was a monumental struggle.
Yeah.
And
I've been in positions like that. I know that that isn't hyperbole, exaggeration. You can get into that state. You become frozen almost.
and like, is it worth breathing in?
Yeah.
Is a
It's
question that's
it's
asked.
effectively where you get to. Yeah.
Yeah. And
And it's less of a conscious question. It's more just of a, this is very difficult and I kind of don't want to anymore.
yeah.
Yeah. I think, which is quite funny because in a lot of ways, I think that that instinct is probably one of the main reasons that people don't take the extra step in depressive states because it's work to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that there's even a high resistance to physically doing that because it's a decisive action. That's interesting. It's something about the decisive nature of it. It's something about the will to decide what to do now. Like I have a very big problem with unintentional time. It's something that absolutely drives me up the wall now. And I wonder if sorry. And I wonder if in a large part it's because of my previous experience in life. That perhaps it was a defense mechanism I've evolved after being through that state. Or if I end up doing things that feel like they were a waste of time without intentionally deciding ahead of time that that's what I'm going to do, I feel miserable and I get very irritable very quickly. Like I need to plan ahead of time. But when you're in that kind of state, I think it's very easy to do that. That deciding to do anything feels pointless. So you end up just wasting your time staying up late, watching YouTube, or whatever is the easiest hit of dopamine you can possibly get your hands on. Because
Which
deciding
is,
to do anything else is too much.
yeah, and that easy dopamine, it's like one sort of laboratory example of that is if you have rats in a lab-like environment, you can get them hooked on various types of drugs easily, and they'll take the drugs until they die. But if you have rats who are living with others, so in their social group, in a wild-like environment without undue stresses, so they're happy rats in a little comfortable rat environment, then you can't get them hooked to destruction on drugs. They will
Yeah.
take a little bit and then go off and do something else.
And it's only
Because,
the lonely ones.
yeah, only the lonely ones trapped in a cage that will be so desperate for dopamine that they will take it. And if you are in or prone to or near that sort of state because life has kicked you down and then kicked you again and again, yeah, there's
Yeah, I wonder if you put depressed people in like a flat share environment together, if it would be beneficial to their mental health. Like rather than all of them convincing each other to go further down, the simple fact of bumping into someone while going to the bathroom might brighten their day. Like it might force them to be more isolationist because there's a tendency towards that, but at a certain extent, you can only be so much in isolation. Like you need to come out of your room to go to the bathroom. You know, you need to go and eat breakfast.
I'd almost go now. I'm not sure how practical it is, but a step further than that. But like being able to, this would be an interesting one. I'm getting very speculative here, and we're talking about
Yeah,
something
yeah.
that we don't have a good first-hand experience of, so we can't really go too deep into it, or we'll go off on some abstract tangent that doesn't actually connect to reality. But if there was, say, a charity, like this is, you could see this, a charity who could, where people could contact and say, my life is miserable, I just want to have space, and then go to like a farm stay.
Mm.
And like,
Boy,
I
that
think
would
that,
that would help a lot of people.
yeah, like not even like a fully serviced farm stay, although it would have to be done carefully because you'd need the mental health support for people who were in need of serious help. But like
Mm.
a the ability to say subscribe to this thing, and then when you need some space, you can go out there and spend some time. And like, if now I've got an image in my head that, oh, like hunger's a big motivator, and I'm not saying that don't feed the people. There's more to this concept than that. It's that like, if you are a bit down and life's been kicking you, and you are feeling bad because you're in a bad situation and you've been worn down, that's not a fundamental problem with you. Like your cat's died, your boyfriend or girlfriend's left while insulting
Mm.
you, you lost your job and you're struggling to get by. It's like there's a reason to be freaking depressed,
Yeah.
right? And being able to go somewhere where it's like, why bother to get up? Because I'm really hungry. Okay. And then sort of like you've got a difficulty to get over because there's always something you've got to do in life, but it's reduced to the point where you can do it. Like you get up and there's some eggs in the kitchen or there's some cereal and you can get that. And then you're in this relatively nice environment with birds outside, and it's like mental asylums shouldn't be like prisons. Like, of course, there are people who are paranoid schizophrenic will try and kill anyone who comes close to them, and that like how much
I
choice do
think
you have? But
conflating people with depression and mental institutions is a bad idea.
yeah.
Like, I
I'm
don't
on
think
the
those two things should be even remotely related.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not in a space I know well, so I'm sort of feeling around blindly.
Okay. Well, I think you're getting pretty close. I think the one distinction I would throw on is the idea of hunger being a motivator,
Mm,
because I think likely that people would just lie in bed and not move and then like slowly starve themselves until they're very, very desperate, which would be not ideal. I
yeah, I
think
can see that happening. Yeah.
I think forced responsibility would actually be a better solution. Being like they go out to the farm environment, there's people around who they know are relying on them to do a job, and then
Mm,
there's consequences of if they don't, and then making it so that when they go out and do the job, it's a pro-social environment where like there's people around, everyone's trying to have a good time, like maybe there's a bit of music, and it's not like backbreaking work, it's sort of pretty cruisy stuff, but there is some benefit to it.
and some reinforcement of the reward, like thank
Mm.
you.
Yeah, yeah, and making it, doing everything you can, like that's funny. Setting up a touch grass work environment that is as ideally healthy as a work environment can be as
Mm,
therapy. That's interesting. The having work environment that isn't manipulative and abusive and psychopathic being an actual therapy to people who have depressive tendencies or circumstances at
mm,
the moment. Of like, you come here, you do work, and what do you know? You're not being abused, and people like you, and they say thank you, and you get some money. And then you go home at the end of the day and go, wow, I did the thing. And being a touch grass environment, sun, fresh air, talking with people, and being around like animals to have that sort of calming effect. like the people who do equine therapy or whatever, but more practical. There's probably a pretty good advantage there. It's interesting that we discussed this because of discussions I had with my wife earlier today, not about depression, but it's a very concern about the individual's plight sort of conversation. And as a person, I've been leaning more and more away from that as I get older. But you could do this as a mass scale way of treating people who have mental problems, not mental problems, depressive problems, unemployment people as well, because they're generally linked. Legitimate mental would probably be a mental institution. And still have it be a benefit to society rather than a cost. A rehabilitation that doesn't really cost, like it might be, they're not going to be being productive enough to be profitable, let's say. It's probably going to be enough to be at cost. But in the long run of rehabilitating a person like that into being a positive forward momentum type of individual, then that's beneficial to the society. And at least you're not paying out of pocket during that time to try and get them better in, sitting in a sterile white cubicle talking to someone who doesn't really care, which wouldn't help.
There's two sides to this, or two sort of knock-on effects that come to mind, that it's like, if you follow it through to its logical conclusion, it wouldn't just be a way for people to have a break, get better, and then go back to what made them sick, because they wouldn't want to. It's a way of waking people up and giving them something worthwhile. And
it's like a retreat.
Yeah. But then people who do that would want more of that, and so it would almost become a pipeline out of the system.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so you have them set up in such a way where they have all their amenities. They have, food and water and etc. And perhaps they do shared meals, so the person doesn't have to worry about cooking for themselves and all that. Make it a part of the thing. Maybe they have a room in the house of one of the people who works on whatever farm, if we're going to do farm, because I think that would work well personally. Person who's responsible for the person who's going through troubles goes into their room in the morning and says, "Hey, wake up, come on, gotta go do thing." Gets them up. All right, here's breakfast. Eat this, have a coffee, drink this, get ready, got your clothes, awesome. Very like a kid almost. Helping them through the process, get them out. Okay, we're going to do this. All right, how about you do that? It's not too hard, does small thing. We're building this thing. Hey, could you hold this while I tighten the screw? Or hey, I'll hold the heavy thing. Can you just push this bolt in? Something like that. Just little things throughout the day. They're sort of just tagging along, but they do some help. And then in the evening, they're like, cool, you're done for the day, There's a beautiful deck out there sitting in the sun with a couple of chairs. Why don't you go sit, I'll make you a lemonade or whatever. But to remove sources of distraction was the point I was getting at. So you have all these things to help build a routine. You have all of this work to help build confidence. Hey, I'm doing something that's helpful. I'm actually helping people. I'm doing something that's meaningful, and I can see the reaction in the people around me. And because it's a, based in reality environment, I can see the physical result of the work we did at the end of the day. The animals got fed. That fence, we fixed it. Basic stuff. And then when it's evening relax time, to remove sources of negativity and distraction. So you're not allowed phone. Maybe you get a dumb phone, so you can call and text and still be in touch with people in the outside world and not have access to, say, social media. And that gives that person a chance to sit outside, listen to the birds, not have noise in their ears all the time, not have something controlling their thoughts all the time, and then that would give them the opportunity for reflection.
There'd be a withdrawal phase involved in that to get
Yes,
off the
there would.
phone.
Yeah, like the kids who sit there doing this with nothing in their hand. But it would, like you were saying, it would give them a chance to reflect on their life back home outside of this environment and maybe come to the conclusion that maybe I don't want to go back and do that. Okay, well, what do I want to go back and do? And start replanning things out. Like you were saying, if a person is becoming depressed because they're in a sick environment, you take them out, put them in a healthy environment, remove the connections to the sick environment, remove the distractions, and then give them time to reflect and meaning to sustain them. And by the time they're ready to go back to their world, they might decide, maybe I don't want to work in this job that I hate. Or, maybe this partner that's being abusive, I don't want to be with. Maybe this, maybe that, maybe this. Whatever it is that the individual comes up with. And then they can go back into the world with a plan. I'm going to resign this and I'm going to go and do this. Or I'm going to not engage in this activity that's been painful for me.
There was something that I heard of that, oh, a couple of things that this brings to mind is one was the mutual friends that I stayed at after leaving my ex-wife.
Yeah, where we
Some
met.
of that, yeah, like I didn't have many responsibilities. It was just like, I've got the sole parent benefit, I'm paying rent, we organize food, I tag along when you head out with your kid and so on. And it's like, I was just like, and just sort of deal with stuff until I could deal with more, and then I got a job and so on. That feels a lot like what you're describing there, but also that there was, oh, I think it was a story that Mum read to us when I was being homeschooled. Now, early America, the Indian population had been knocked back by smallpox, and in the middle of winter, um, in this palisaded village, the main characters were um, European in their parents' house, and some Indian warriors jumped over the palisade because the snowdrifts had got high enough that they could just jump over, and basically kidnapped a bunch of kids. So the Indians kidnapped a bunch of kids and then took them off into the wilderness and started raising them as kids. And then by the time summer came around, then it was like, we're not going to stop you. If you want to leave, you're free to. And they had to learn the language in that time to be able to communicate, and they got sort of positive reinforcement for that. And you can call it Stockholm syndrome in some ways, but it's also sounding like what you described of healthy environment. And I'm not saying that the uh, American Indian uh, culture was perfect. I'm saying that it was better in certain ways than the European culture of the time. Like they
Well,
didn't
even if
have.
it wasn't better, it's different.
Mm,
Like you were saying before, you can only really see it in retrospect to see it from the outside.
mm. But these kids, I think some of them might have decided to go back. But I remember a scene where the priest of the or minister, whatever his precise designation was, of the town where they came from, came to the Indian village where these kids were, and the girl was doing some stuff. The girl who was the main character was doing some stuff topless like all the other girls. So they'd just sort of fitted in and been welcomed in. And then one of the boys who'd come along with them, he was naked like many of the other boys his age, just sort of running around. Oh, I think they were young adolescent, but it's like different culture. So that was just normal. Like they're splashing in a river. Why get your clothes wet?
Mm.
I'm not sure of the precise details, but he told that priest to go away. Sort of, he'd taken the American Indian lifestyle and flourished in it, and he felt closer to that, or he felt good enough about that he actively turned down the option to go back to his life as it was.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you'd attack that story for all kinds of ideological reasons, but for the
Mm,
point you're trying to make of you could, being removed from an environment that you weren't happy in, end up happier
mm,
in a different environment. And rather than deciding, I'll go back and I'll try and change this, that, or the other thing, you just say, no, actually, I like it here. I'd
mm.
rather do this. And then set your life up around that and go forward.
And going into the
Because,
future,
yeah,
I could
what's
see that
our,
being really powerful.
yeah, it's a far better system than you go to your doctor, you say you're depressed, and they're like, cool, here's some drugs, get out. That's not helpful to anyone.
Mm,
Or even therapy, like the sterile sitting down with a stranger and they're like, so tell me why you want to kill yourself. This isn't going to help. Shouldn't have said that. Oh well. Um,
Sometimes it's because my life sucks.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
like
then
I had a time when,
medication of everything is a problem.
yeah, I think that uh, there was a time when I was with my ex-wife before my son was born, when what is it? I'd got to the point of wishing it would be over. It's interesting that this is, well, it's possibly obvious that it's difficult to talk about, but yeah,
You had so many
actively,
layers of suppression then, they're probably still in effect now.
yeah, I don't know. It's a tangle, as you can imagine, but I'd got to the point of actively considering it, and I'd talked to someone from her church who was kind and helpful and tried to get some support, and that sort of helped. But I think looking back in retrospect, like I don't think things got better in total, but more that I had more reasons not to, and I got stronger.
Hmm. You dealt with it more.
Mm.
Yeah, I wonder, was that better though? I mean, obviously, for the case of your son, yes, but hmm,
I think
devil's in the
I
details.
was I was pathologically determined not to give up. I had excluded the possibility of leaving her totally, and it took
Yeah,
a long
until
time for that to
until you
break.
did. Yeah,
Yeah,
until you
which
decided
was
to.
probably 3 years after that point.
I think I think the reason why you had to is that you were also not particularly willing to fight with it, is
Mm,
my guess.
yeah.
Like the only reason, and I know this well by seeing other relationships in our friend circles who have similar dynamics to the one that you had and the one that we had, is that the reason why we got through it is I had that attitude of I will not end this for a long time. But I also had the attitude of I will fight you and call you out on your actions when I see them to be wrong.
Mm,
And we were actually talking about this earlier today. One of the reasons why it ended up working in the end was that I let go of the first one before the second one. Was we had a fight about something she had done, and I made the case of you need to fix this or I'm out. And she was describing to me earlier today that one of the reasons why that worked was because at the time she had her young daughter and she was going through the phase of effectively being a narcissist, as most 2-year-olds are, all 2-year-olds, and learning to be manipulative and doing everything they can to get their own way. And she could see in her daughter the actions that I was describing that she was doing. And she made that connection of like, these are the things that my daughter does that makes me angry at her and not like her. And then, hey, my husband's saying that I'm doing them and that he's not okay with me doing them. And up to the point of you need to choose yes or no. And that was the reason why it worked, because she had already sort of had that building in the background and observing her daughter's actions. And she had made that connection during the fight. Obviously, a long, slow road since then. But to your point, I've seen other relationships where people have a similar dynamic. And then the husband is unwilling to argue with the wife. And just being like, look, I'm just going to accept whatever happens.
Yeah. My only response to conflict was to retreat.
Yeah, effectively, yeah. And I see that in friends of ours as well. You know, they're still together, which is great for them. Like, good on them. But there is certainly a cost for that.
My only response was to retreat, but into a corner. And then sort of hide in the corner.
Yeah, mentally. And then eventually you just decided better to leave the whole thing than to sit in the corner.
And the stressor that did it was the fact that she wasn't letting me raise my son because she wanted all the attention for herself, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's not, her perspective on this would be different, of course. Like, she, as far as
I'd love to hear it, but I wouldn't believe whatever she said.
Yeah, but
sorry. Well, it took a very long time to get my wife to the point where she believed in the idea of using words for discovering or discovering or articulating truth rather than manipulating other people.
Yeah, because there was something I heard about narcissistic people perceiving others drawing healthy boundaries as a literal attack on them.
Yeah.
And
because it's an attack on their ability to be manipulative or their attack on their power.
But if that layer is subconscious,
control is probably the word there.
Which can be reinforced by past traumas, which give a perception that the control is needed for safety, and therefore lend an element of fight or flight to it.
Yeah, and that's why it's such an emotional. Yeah,
and like it helps make a lot more sense of things in retrospect, and like it leads to also, in my head at least, a lack of blame. It's like, I can see why that happened. Yeah.
To an extent.
The responsibility is still there. No, it's not so much lack of blame.
It depends on how much you want to infantilize them.
I think a lot of adults are infantile in a lot of their thinking. Like, they never. What was it?
This is true, but I personally don't want to treat people that way.
Yeah.
I get very tired of the older generations looking at like 20 or 30-year-olds and going, "Oh, you're just a kid," or even anyone treating another adult that way.
There's some nuances there I'm not getting right, because it's like,
I agree that there is devils in the details there. My point with that is, I think I alluded to this before, is that you can optimize for the individual, but you may pay a cost for the collective. And personally, I have found my philosophy on how things should be governed drifting from optimizing for the individual for optimizing for the group or the collective. So I'll use an example that I discussed earlier today, which was like unemployment benefits. That's a very much a case of trying to optimize for this person in this one situation. The best path for them would be if they had this support.
Mm,
Okay. But the cost of that is now there's an incentive for people to get paid not to work.
mm,
So when we go to the infantilizing thing, it's while in some situations that's true, if you start allowing that to be an acceptable idea, then it creates an incentive that a perverse incentive that damages the culture or damages the society that they're in.
I think you do need to have very low bar jobs. Like before unemployment was common, you had, I think it was the Ministry of Works, basically very unproductive as a workforce, and would tend to pilfer things out of railway carriages and things like that. But the argument being, is it better to have these people who are antisocial and disruptive going to a job and bringing home some money to support themselves and their family, or go to the pub and drink and so on? Is it better for them to have something to go do every day, or is it better for them to sit on a benefit? And having something vaguely productive to do seems of more benefit to them in society than uh, just giving them the benefit and then letting them go do things because they're bored, or cutting them off from either of those and forcing them into crime. And I'm not saying that that is an ideal lifestyle, but I'm saying that that is a lifestyle that some people choose or fall into. And
I have mild objections with the cutting them off leads to them becoming criminals idea, but I very much prefer the giving them a place to go if you're going to do pro-social programs,
mm,
or cutting them off would be where my philosophy goes to. Like, I don't have a problem with this is a new thing for me. I really don't have a problem with government programs if they are designed to be in benefit for the culture, in
mm,
benefit for the society, like getting unemployed people and actually getting them to do something useful and not like on paper, actually.
mm.
And if that's not something that can be achieved competently, then I believe cutting off is the better solution. Put
There
them in a
need
position of desperation. If a desperate person decides that crime is the right way to go, then they should be imprisoned
it
because
needs
that's what happens when you break the law.
mm,
Because if you get in a desperate situation, you can get a job.
mm.
And I know
There,
that's sort of a oh pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of thing, but I did it. I was homeless,
mm,
and it was pretty damn easy to find a place to live and get a job when I really needed to.
mm.
Like
I don't
McDonald's
want
is
to
always
acknowledge it.
hiring.
Yeah,
There's enough
I don't want to
not
acknowledge
enough
it, but
people as there is.
there is some agreement I have with that, and it's one of those internal contradiction things. Like there also needs to be places for people who, for reasons of mental disability, just scored bad on the genetic lottery, the whatever low IQ. There's I'd say 10% of the population struggle to function in a very complex environment. Like it
Mm,
might be 5%, but that bottom 5% needs somewhere that they can go. And I think Dad had
yeah,
a story
I think the
of
Ministry of Works is a good idea for that, for
hmm,
sure. And finding a place to be.
someone at his work had the idea of, or I think it was associated with a charity in some way, but employment for people with mental disabilities. And I think the scenario was that they had these different types of rivets that would all end up mixed up because of being used or something. I forget the precise situation, but they needed to be sorted. And it was basically a case of this one in that box, this one in that box. And for a lot of people, that would be a mind numbingly boring job. Just get me out of here, I'm so bored. But for someone who oh, okay, there are no nice ways to say this, but someone who's in that 5th percentile,
Mm.
it can be rewarding and they can get very fast and efficient at doing that one job.
Yeah, it just takes
And
time.
yeah, and they might not even, it might even make more financial sense to throw out the mixed bin and then buy brand new ones in sorted packets because of modern mass production. But having that job there gives that person something to do and a
Mm.
purpose. And it's like I go to work and I sort rivets.
Yeah,
And it's like
like we
this is
we know someone who's like that, and
mm,
yeah, friend of friend kind of thing, family member. They work at a post office for that exact reason,
mm,
of sorting mail into this box or that box.
mm,
And they live with a family member because they're incapable of handling their own finances and cooking and things like that. But they can do that job just plenty. They
mm,
get up and they go to their job and they do it and they're happy and then they come home. And that's contributing to society, and it's also removing a cost as well.
mm,
And that's far better than what would be. You're not going to get a person to voluntarily go out and try and find that if they could easily stay at home.
mm,
Like, I have a friend, not a friend anymore, but I know someone who I've been friends with for like 15 years, and they've been on a benefit for 10 years. And they don't have anything, they don't do a job, they don't do anything. Because why would he? He doesn't have to.
mm,
All he has to do is go to the doctor every 6 months and get a wee piece of paper that says he still has this problem, which I know for a fact is made up.
mm,
And that's, you know, over the course of 10 years, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars of New Zealand taxpayer money is that for that one guy who contributes literally nothing to society?
mm,
In fact, he probably costs quite a bit now because he's all of the medications that he's got himself prescribed, and now he's gone into the trans thing, so he's going to end up in the surgery and all the drugs that come with that. Massive amounts of cost for the society, but good profit for the pharmaceutical company.
mm. I think there's a piece that's missing from the argument for um harsher now. I want to say harsher treatment, but that doesn't sound right. Harsher encouragement for those who
It's
aren't contributing.
it's optimization for, yeah, it's this are you optimizing for what's best for the society, or are you optimizing for what's best for the individual?
But it's also a form of trolley problem in the sense
Which is
of
a trade-off. Yeah, yeah, it's a
yeah,
trade-off. Yeah.
yeah. The idea being that not acting is still a choice and still has a cost. Taking
Yes.
the
Which is the third
benevolent,
one, the
yeah.
no support, no program option.
Well, leaving them on the program also has a cost.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Taking
yeah.
them off the
That
program has a cost. Like it's like
all of it's a
which
choice.
cost? And the
Yeah,
costs are not necessarily in that particular case. They're somewhere.
if you could start from not having a setup already and then choose which way to go, it might be easier. But then also there's the problem of where they are now and how to transition
Mm,
across. But yeah, my overarching point is I've just noticed from once upon being a very liberal libertarian type to becoming much more of a collective society level person, of not optimizing for the individual's well-being or individual's perceived happiness,
mm,
and optimizing for, what is it, ask not what your nation can do for you but what you can do for your nation.
mm. There's
And it's just odd
also
from being the opposite once upon a time. Because
yeah.
I used to perceive the greater level structures such as nation, state, nation, religion, culture, community, of being, God, how liberal is this? of being structures that infringe on my free choice,
Mm.
on my freedom to be hedonistic and selfish. And I think the switch came when I understood that these are structures that outlast individual lifespans. When one thinks only of themselves, then they care about individual freedom in terms of being able to enact whichever hedonistic whim they want at any given moment. But as soon as you have children and you start thinking about your children's children and their children, you realize that the greatest structure of society is it is there to serve them, not you. And in which case, the individual sacrificing themselves to make the society itself greater is of benefit to your children and their children, and therefore more important than the cost that it would impose on individuals. Now, obviously, to a point, everything's a spectrum and a trade-off. I'm not suggesting complete authoritarian, totalitarian state, but
Mm.
there is the idea of we should move more in that direction, that we care too much about the individual well-being of the citizens, and we care too little about the well-being of the nation.
Mm. There is definitely still a place for caring for the individuals, and I think that
Yeah.
empowering those who feel so motivated to go and give individualized help to those who need it, like the Salvation Army, which I'm not sure if it's a
Charities.
multinational thing, but yeah, charities who go out and, like, I remember recently driving past Salvation Army Reintegration Center. Like, okay, so as far as I can tell from the title, that was for people who were in prison and needed help reintegrating into society. This charity was there to help them do it, probably help them find a job and somewhere to live and so on. So they're not stuck with, what do I do? I don't know.
Mm.
I'm hungry. I'll go steal something. Right? That's a bad scenario. And so having people who will try to, it's like act individually at the individual level as you can, but there is a wider society, a wider fabric that supports all the individuals, and that wider society needs support and to make sure that there's not
Mm.
too much disruption in the wrong place. Like having environments where people can go and do nominally disruptive things like off-roading, if done in the central city, would be very disruptive. But you can go out to the country and do it, or sports shooting, or clay pigeon shooting, or paintball, or whatever. Like these are
Steam vents.
wild. Sorry.
Steam vents.
Yeah, yeah. They are giving people the opportunity to go wild in certain ways. But you also need, of course, okay, this individual has broken the boundaries, broken the laws that we have
Mm.
in place,
In no
and those,
circumstances is that acceptable.
yeah, but then those are chosen with
Yes, the law is wrong,
argument
but
and compromise and so on.
yeah.
All right, let's assume for a minute that the law is, well, no murder, right? Someone went up to someone with a hatchet on the street and killed them. It's like, okay, that person is a danger to others.
Mm.
Lock them up for a while we figure out what next. And if they are paranoid schizophrenic, then it's like, okay, they will probably do this again. If they've done it repeatedly and you just caught them, it's like, okay, you are a serious danger.
Yeah.
Even if you were abused in a dozen different ways as a child, the fact that you are still a serious danger to others now remains.
Yeah.
Prevent other harm
Lock
first.
in box or
Yeah.
remove head.
Well, yeah. Or in the box, like introduce a therapist. Like if you like there is a place for that kind of try and fix the broken people.
Yeah, maybe not murderers, but some people. Yeah, first time violent offenders who robbed a store or something.
Hmm.
Probably. Yeah. or
Yeah.
like domestic abuse, probably.
Mm.
Murderer, probably not. Probably not worth rehabilitating someone like that.
Well, then there are always edge cases, like the guy who, um, how did that one go? This guy was watching his daughter, and he saw the guy. He saw him repeatedly. He could see what was happening and what the danger was, like the way this guy was stalking his young daughter. He'd told the police, and they hadn't done anything. And I think the guy might have made a move or something. No, or he already had, and because nothing had actually eventuated, the police hadn't done anything, and so then this guy went and killed him, and then handed himself into the police. Like, okay, you killed a guy. That's wrong. But
This is where jury of the peers should be coming in and going, not guilty.
yeah,
Yeah.
or that some say there's a rapist who didn't get convicted due to lack of evidence, but the dad say saw him do it or something, or there's some technicality he got off on, say. Like,
Yeah,
I'm not saying that this should be condoned, but at the same time, it's like that's not the same as someone
well,
who's psychopathic. Jury of the peers.
see, yeah, when it comes down to that level of things, I'm actually a bit more Russia is notorious for this.
Mm-hmm.
They are very notorious for murdering pedophiles.
Mm.
And there'll be, stories about like, oh, there's a pedophile was found dead in a forest committing suicide after shooting himself in the back 6 times. Like, we all know that that's not the case, but the society is like, well, yeah, we're not going to punish the people who did that.
Yeah.
And I think at a certain point, it's, man rapes someone's daughter and gets killed by the father. That father should not be punished, period. As, if the justice system couldn't bring him to justice, then someone else did. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
At a certain
Or at
point,
least,
vigilantism should be acceptable in certain
or at least
circumstances.
some level of leniency, like
Yeah, community service.
yeah. It's like you killed someone.
Yeah.
You did that knowing there'd be some sort of penalty. We see the consequence and so on.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
like there was another
But
guy
it's the thing.
who
It comes back to that society optimizing for the individual or for the collective, because you get too far into optimizing for the individual and you start sympathizing with criminals because they had a bad upbringing. Care about the individual, protect the individual. It's like, well, what about their victim? Care about the individual. Some individuals should not be cared for because they are damaging to the society, or caring for them would be damaging to the society.
like there's a
And then leave it up to individuals to make their own choice through charity.
you by biting the hand that feeds you, you negate your right to food.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
negate your right to be fed.
Yeah. Yeah. And the idea of like, by threatening someone else's life, yours is also forfeit. I wanted to, a while back, make a point when it came to my individualism versus collectivism thing, because I know people who are all about the individualism or alarm bells with that one. I'm not saying in all circumstances, because in many circumstances, giving the individual more autonomy and more choice is beneficial for the collective. Like free markets. You lower taxes, you lower regulation, you lower restrictions on the individual. They thrive. The people who can will thrive more, and that is beneficial to the larger culture and the larger society.
But then again, prevent excess externalization of costs or tragedy of the commons type occurring.
Yeah, we're appropriate. Yes.
Don't let someone pollute the river where the drinking water comes from.
We're appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is too far. There is such a thing as too far. And being in farming, I can see it very clearly. There is too far, but that's beside the point. my point with that is more that in some circumstances, denying individual freedoms or individual autonomy to do negative actions, yeah, denying individual autonomy to do negative actions can be morally just. But that does not mean that you should also deny individual actions to do, good actions. There needs to be a level of nuance there rather than just saying all liberty, all individual actions permissible, or all state authority, individual actions are mandated by choice. It's like, you've got to have a middle ground.
And there has to be a sort of acknowledgement of the ignorance of the lawmakers, in the sense of freedom to choose includes the freedom to make choices that the official narrative deems harmful, such as, so if someone wants to smoke marijuana, it's like, okay, I
My
don't
brain
know the
went to
difference between...
pro-choice with that one.
Sorry?
My brain went to the pro-choice argument with that one.
Yeah, like if someone wants to screw their brain over, we already allow it with alcohol, right?
Yeah, no, see, okay, you want to go marijuana, that's fair. I agree with that one. Because what's the problem that people see with pot smokers? Unproductive, lazy, useless. Okay, sure, take away the benefit, but let them still smoke.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like,
make it so that they have to buy it through a store, not a guy on the street corner. Now they need money. Now they have to get a job. Now they have to pay taxes. Now they have to have an apartment. Like, maybe their ambition wouldn't be as high as it would otherwise, but maybe it would.
Yeah. It's like what you control in the situation. Like, there was an argument I heard about regarding fires. Like, fireplaces in Christchurch are reasonably heavily regulated because there are potentials for smog because of the local geography. And so there are a lot of sort of potentially really good fireplaces that you can't use, and it's almost impossible to get one. But then you have a power cut, and then everyone's freezing because they've got no heat pumps and so on.
Yeah.
But there was I think it was a professor at uni that I had who said, no, don't regulate the fireplaces, regulate the chimney, right? Someone drives down the street with drives down the street and takes air samples. It's like, okay, I saw and videoed smoke with a spotlight on the chimney, say, smoke coming from your chimney at this time in the middle of the night, at the time when chimneys normally get smoky because you damp down the fire. This is against regulations, and I tested the smoke coming out of it somehow, and so on. Here is your fine, like parking ticket or that sort of thing. There's subtleties and nuances in that to make it workable, but the point being, you're polluting the common environment. That should be the thing that is regulated or controlled, rather than the thing you have in your own home. Like, set up
I don't
whatever you
believe on
like.
an individual scale that should be regulated or controlled. No.
Well,
And
then
when it
how
comes
would
to
you...
businesses, I would agree, but I don't think on an individual person.
But if the residential fireplace usage alone could make the air toxic for everyone,
Toxic?
when the smog was, I remember there's something about when the smog was worse in the past, that spending a night in the city was similar to smoking a cigarette.
A single cigarette?
Yeah.
I guess it depends on your definition of harm, I suppose, but
Well, if you look at the social levels of harm, of how much illness does that cause, how many asthma attacks and so on, because
I'm
it's
sure
being
there's other
imposed on everyone.
causes that are greater. But my hesitation with that one is more the case of, if you leave people to their own devices, they end up making these choices regardless in a lot of circumstances.
Giving people the free market option for less smoky fireplaces.
Yeah, or people going, I don't like how much smoke there is around, maybe I just won't use my fire, or use my heat pump instead.
Yeah,
Filtering systems.
Yeah, there's a conflict in there.
Yeah, it's a nuanced one, but yeah.
That's kind of the point,
It's a
isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah,
There's
exactly,
nuance
and
in
that's why
everywhere.
there's local. Like those laws apply for Christchurch, they don't apply for here, which is great, and that's the way that should be.
Mm,
The more local the law, the more willingness I will be to support it. Because if you guys in Christchurch wish to do that for yourselves, by all means.
mm,
But the second you start voting for that to be the case in my rural environment, I'm gonna be not so happy.
mm. Yeah.
Yeah, which is why cities should not be regulating what happens in the country.
Mm. Mm.
Obviously, you get into problems with jurisdiction and borders there, but
Yeah, yeah. That's what I was
nothing's
thinking.
without fault, I suppose.
Mm.
I mean, this whole thing plays out from liberalism itself, which is that intense focus on the individual. Something I heard, I think it was it was Carl Benjamin talking about it, the old Sargon of Akkad, that
Mm.
the fundamental principle that underpins liberalism is the idea um, that natural man has no society, and therefore modern society is something that is imposed upon man and restricting his will, which is
Yeah.
obviously wrong. Um, and when you base your philosophy upon that, all restrictions on impulsive pleasures from society or from the state are morally wrong from that base standpoint. But when you understand that, of course, society evolved out of tribal culture and troop culture from before we were even humans, you get the perception of no, society is something that grows up from around us. It is something that we've always had. It is generative from us.
And the current form is one that's evolved over time.
Mm.
What we have
Yeah.
evolved out of our biological makeup
Mhm.
into something that mostly sort of works. And that
Yeah.
is valuable.
Yeah. There wouldn't be human beings without culture or society. And
Mm.
therefore, what your individual hedonistic whim wants is not always more important than what the culture or society demands of you in terms of responsibility, honor, or duty.
Mm. I feel like we've rounded that topic reasonably well.
Fair enough.
I'm trying to remember what the other thing that I thought of earlier this week was.
Well, that was a tidy hour. We could stop there if you like.
Oh, there was something else. Ah, yes, yes. Our discussion that we were mentioning uh, about our different perspectives on where society is going from a why do we each think the ways we do perspective.
Oh wow, the back to our roots with optimism and pessimism from way back when.
Well, yeah, you'd mentioned, was it last week, being interested in exploring why I thought the way I did about it, and I think that we're a lot closer than than is apparent from certain perspectives. But it would be interesting to find the axiom differences that lead to that.
Okay. Well, we need to start with a definition, I suppose.
I think there are a lot of definitions that we'll need to make along the way, because I think a lot of, like, if I talk about collapse of civilization, I have a different thing in mind than you when you say that.
I'm wondering if we should stop this recording and start a new one to have it be its own thing, because we might end up going for a few hours on this topic.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe have some food. We can
I
edit off
could
the
use a
last few
bite to
minutes of.
eat. Yeah.
Let's
All
do
right,
that.
everyone at home, go have something to eat. Come back next week.
Yeah. See ya.
See ya.